My name is Maya Carter. I'm 32 years old and I live in Bloomington, Indiana. That night, I had just gotten home from work when my stepfather slapped me across the face just for asking why my things had been shoved out into the living room. He didn't yell, he wasn't angry, he just pointed at the old, worn out couch and said, like I was a stranger, "That's your bed now. Amber and her baby need the room more." My mother stood behind him. She didn't object. She said nothing. I said nothing either. I was still the one paying the mortgage on that house every month, something they never once acknowledged. They called it helping the family. But in truth, I was just extra. Have you ever been treated like a disposable piece by your own family? Used to support someone else while being told it's your duty? If my story hits close to home, leave a comment below. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible in your own house. And don't forget to subscribe because what happened after that, they never saw coming. I once dropped out of my final year of college because of my mother's unexpected car accident. The doctors said she needed full-time care for at least 6 months, and my stepfather was working at a wildlife reserve nearly 200 miles away. My younger sister was too busy living her carefree life in Atlanta back then. No kids, no responsibilities, just curated pictures on social media. So I came home. I put aside my senior project and gave up an internship at an accounting firm I had worked 3 years to earn. I didn't regret it, not once. In the early days after the accident, my mother was too weak to even get out of bed. I cooked, changed bandages, took her to physical therapy, cleaned the house, sorted out insurance paperwork, and picked up part-time shifts at the neighborhood grocery store. Every morning I got up before 6, every night I lay down after 11. I did it all without needing to be asked. Maybe that's why, when she got better, no one thought I ever needed rest. Just a few months after she fully recovered, I overheard her telling the neighbor I was just staying at the house temporarily because it's close to work. The word temporarily sank into me like a blade. I used to think this was my home, but I realized then I was only ever a guest, borrowing space. Things stayed somewhat manageable for the next few years until Amber came back. She showed up one fall morning, holding a newborn in one arm and dropping her suitcase on the front porch. No warning. My mother opened the door, saw her youngest daughter, exhausted and pale from sleepless nights, and without asking anything, reached out to cradle the baby. "She's home," my mom said cheerfully, turning to me. "Maya, go clear out your room for Amber so she can get some rest." I froze in the kitchen, a soup ladle still in my hand. "Amber's room? You mean my room?" I asked, voice shaking. "Yes. Amber and the baby need their own space. You work all day at the office. Sleeping in the living room won't bother you. No one will disturb you." Amber didn't say a word. She avoided my eyes, pretending to fumble with the baby's jacket. The baby was fast asleep in a soft wrap, cheeks pink like peaches. I didn't blame him. I didn't even blame her. I just couldn't understand why everyone expected me to accept this without question. 3 days later, all my belongings had been moved into the living room. The old sofa where we used to gather for movie nights was now my bed. The tiny kitchen where I once cooked meals with my mother was now filled with bottles, burp cloths, and crying at 3 a.m. I still cooked, still worked, still paid my portion of the household costs. Until one Monday morning when my mom handed me a handwritten sheet. A new cost breakdown. "You'll need to contribute an extra $300 per month," she said, as casually as if she were talking about the weather. More people in the house means higher costs. Electricity, water, groceries, and diapers. I looked at her, choking down the questions caught in my throat. "Are you asking me to pay for Amber's baby?" She placed the paper on the table without looking at me. "Amber was abandoned. She doesn't have steady income. You have a full-time office job. You can manage. It's only temporary." I clenched my fists to steady my voice. "Do you know I've been sending back almost half of my paycheck every month? Do you remember I dropped out of college to care for you? I never once complained." My mother cut me off, her tone flat. "Because you're responsible, Maya. That's why I trust you. No one forced you to drop out. You chose to do the right thing." That sentence felt like a push off a cliff. I didn't argue further. I nodded, stepped out of the kitchen, and that night I curled up once again on the sunken couch, hearing the faint sound of a baby crying through the closed door. The door that used to be mine. I paid the increased amount. I still cleaned the house while Amber napped or fed the baby. I still bought milk, toilet paper, and sometimes left snacks my mom liked in the fridge. I didn't know when I started calling all this normal. Maybe it was the moment I stopped answering the questions in my head. Maybe it was when I finally realized in this house, love always came with conditions, and I had stopped qualifying for it long ago. There were nights I woke not from the baby's cries, but from a weight pressing on my chest, the sense that I didn't belong, that the sofa was not only wrecking my back, but draining my spirit. I would quietly walk to the kitchen, pour a glass of water, and try to find a sliver of calm in what was once my home. But one night, when my feet touched the cold wooden floor, I heard voices coming from the kitchen, louder than usual. No crying baby, no background TV, just my mother and Amber. Mom was peeling an apple. Amber sat at the table cradling the baby who had fallen asleep. Mom let out a dry laugh. Don't worry, Maya's not going anywhere. She's always been weak. She'll just keep putting up with this until we're done with her. Amber sighed, then chuckled. Honestly, I worry she might finally snap one day, but yeah, she's always been the one trying to please everyone. She covers the electric, the groceries. I haven't had to think about bills in months. I stood frozen behind the wall, still holding my glass. The shock came not from anger, but from something deeper, like trust disintegrating layer by layer. Mom continued, Did you see last month's electricity bill? Nearly double. But Maya pays on time, never asks questions. I just use her debit card. It's easier. You've seen it. Amber giggled softly. She once asked why I don't chip in. Remember? You just told her. Taking care of your kid is contribution enough. Their voices kept drifting through the dark, slicing deeper with every word. I backed away, heart pounding. I didn't cry. I just no longer felt like I lived in that house. The next morning, as I was organizing work papers at the small table next to the sofa, I noticed a pile of unopened mail on the shoe rack. Mom usually collected the mail and tossed it there. Most of it was junk, ads, coupons, but I saw several plain white envelopes addressed to me. The print was official, the electric company, the water utility, the internet provider. Curious, or more accurately, haunted by what I had heard the night before, I opened one. It was last month's electric bill. The account holder's name wasn't my mom's. It wasn't my stepfather's. It was mine. I opened another, the water bill, also mine. Each one listed payments made on the exact dates I had sent my household contribution to my mother. I sank to the floor, hands trembling. It felt like someone had ripped the curtain away, revealing something raw and unmistakable. They had used my name, my banking information, to register and pay every single utility. No one told me. No one asked. Not once did anyone explain. I remembered 2 years ago when my mom asked me to help set up online bill pay. She said she wasn't good with technology. I had linked my account to help her during a rough patch. I never imagined they'd just keep everything that way. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, eyes fixed on the flickering ceiling light. The baby's crying no longer echoed. All I could hear was the voice in my head asking over and over, "What am I in this house?" The next morning, I walked into the kitchen. My mother stood there, holding her coffee pot. She glanced at me and said, "We're out of sugar. Can you pick some up on your way to work?" I didn't respond. I simply gave a small nod and set my bag down on the table. But inside me, a storm was roaring. I didn't say that I knew. I didn't mention that I'd seen the bills. I wanted to see what else they were hiding from me. And the most painful part wasn't being used. It was being used by the very people I once believed were my home. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, startled by the loud clattering in the kitchen. The smell of pancakes and ham filled the air as I walked in, still groggy, my bare feet freezing on the cold wooden floor. My mom was busy flipping pancakes on the griddle, while Amber sat at the dining table, holding the baby and smiling brightly during a video call. "We're throwing Mason's 1-month party tonight," my mom announced, as if she were the head chef in a restaurant talking to her staff. "Make sure you help clean up the living room early. We need to rearrange the chairs, lay out the tablecloths, light some candles. Mason's dad's family will be coming, should be quite a crowd." I stood still. The living room, where I'd been sleeping for the past 3 months on a sagging sofa next to a small folding table with my laptop and a plastic bin holding a few folded clothes. I no longer had a bedroom. No personal space, and now, not even an identity. After breakfast, I cleared the dishes like I always did, then quietly gathered my blanket and pillow into a large canvas bag and tucked it away behind a makeshift curtain in the corner. I wiped the table, pushed the wooden chairs neatly against the wall, and fluffed the throw pillows, as if no one had ever slept there. My mom passed by, paused to look around, and murmured with the tone of someone praising a hotel maid, "Good, nice and tidy." That afternoon, the house began to fill up. Strangers came and went. There was the chatter of guests, the squeals of children, the mix of cheap perfume and warm food clinging to the air. I stood by the sink, slicing fruit onto a tray, working quietly without being asked. I just couldn't stand the mess. As I brought the fruit tray out, a middle-aged woman with softly curled blonde hair and flawless makeup stepped into the hallway and stopped me. She smiled politely, holding a glass of red wine. "Are you the nanny? Or are you the housekeeper?" I froze for a second. My eyes instinctively avoided looking toward my mother, who was standing nearby. The woman must have sensed my discomfort. She chuckled lightly, as if to ease the moment. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. You just seem so busy. I've seen you cleaning, setting up, running around. You're really holding the place together." Before I could answer, my mother walked over. She didn't smile, she didn't look awkward, she just gave a small nod, barely noticeable unless you were standing as close as I was. "She's just here helping the family," she said, with the same detached tone you'd use to describe someone who wasn't part of the story. I turned away, retreating down the hall, rushed into the bathroom, and shut the door behind me. The noise from the party still slipped in through the cracks, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, uneven, shaky. My chest heaved, my throat burned. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady myself. I couldn't. Everything was rising to my throat. I bent over and threw up. Not from the food, not from any illness, but from something deeper I couldn't even name. It wasn't exactly anger. It wasn't shame either. It was something heavier. Like every year I had quietly sacrificed, tried to live decently, fulfilled my responsibilities, had all been crushed by a single nod. A nod that turned me into a nameless shadow with no place and no role. I turned the water on full blast, washed my face for what felt like forever, then finally stepped out. I returned to the kitchen, continued arranging food on trays, wiped a splash of sauce off the tablecloth, picked up the used napkins from the floor. No one noticed. No one asked where I had gone. My mother was still with the guests, smiling brightly, showing off her grandchild like a divine gift. Amber looked radiant as a princess, a flowing green silk dress, hair in an elegant bun, soft red lips. She didn't look in my direction even once. The sofa I slept on every night was now piled with throw pillows and baby gifts. My canvas bag of bedding had been kicked under the table into a corner. There was no sign I had ever existed there. I backed away to the rear kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, set it on the table, and sat down. I looked out through the glass door into the backyard. The grass was green, sunlight fell gently across the rooftop like gold dust. Beautiful, peaceful, but not meant for me. I took a sip of water, my throat still parched. I sat there like a ghost, in a house that once was mine, but now belonged to people who no longer saw me as part of them. 3 days after the baby's party, when the house had returned to its usual false calm, I found a thick cream-colored envelope neatly placed on the small table next to the sofa. No one mentioned it. No one claimed they had put it there. I picked it up, eyeing the printed name on the front. The sender, a law office representing the property owner. I opened it and unfolded the papers one by one. My eyes scanned the dense legal text until they stopped at a bolded section, notification of ownership change and co-signature rights for property located at. I reread it a second time, then a third. It was the exact address of the house I lived in. And right below, under current owner, Amber Holloway, my name was gone. I sat there for a long while, numb. Then I stood up, took the papers, and walked straight to the dining room, where my mom was folding napkins and my stepfather was wiping a glass vase. I want to know why my name was removed from the house deed. They both froze. My mom blinked, feigning surprise. What? What are you talking about? I held out the papers, setting them down firmly on the table. I just received this from the landlord's attorney. It clearly states that Amber is the new listed owner. This is the house I've been contributing to since day one. My stepfather barely glanced at it before sighing like I had interrupted his evening. Your mother handled that. We transferred it to Amber for long-term stability. You're not planning to start a family, right? I clenched my fists. So that's your reason for erasing me from the house I live in, the one I've paid toward every single month, from legal documents I once co-signed? My mother didn't look up, still folding napkins like nothing had happened. You're overreacting, Maya. Families evolve. You have to adapt. Amber has a child. She needs legal security. Well, she paused. You're stable. You're not tied down. You understand, don't you? I let out a dry laugh, my chest tightening like ice. Stable. Has anyone ever asked if I was okay? Or do you all just assume because I don't complain I can be pushed aside whenever it's convenient? No one responded. I walked out of the room, feeling like my body was full of wet cement. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I lay on the sofa, a thin blanket over half my body, the house deed still on the table like a fresh wound. I opened my laptop, unsure what I was even looking for. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. I logged into my bank account. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Paychecks deposited regularly, the balance modest but intact. But as I scrolled further back, about a year, I saw a pattern of small withdrawals. At first it was $20 here, $50 there, then a few hundred. And more recently, withdrawals of $800, even $1,200, all routed to the same account, a string of numbers I didn't recognize with no attached name. My throat went dry. I opened the automatic payment settings. A long list appeared. Half of it I'd never set up. Utility bills, internet service, even monthly homeowner fees. All of them listed as authorized by Maya Carter. I shakily logged into the auto transfer setup. In the section marked Priority Beneficiary Accounts, one name appeared clearly, Amber Holloway. I collapsed into the chair, holding my head in both hands. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the deed. It was that all this time I had been living under the illusion that I was helping a family in need. Turns out I was just a walking wallet. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, eyes wide open, my back aching from the sagging sofa, my heart aching from the truth laid bare. A house I once believed was my safe haven, now held not even a corner where I belonged. Not on paper, not in their hearts, not even in their memory of all I had done. I hadn't even caught a wink when a soft knock came at the door on Saturday morning. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 gentle taps, as if the person outside didn't want to disturb me. I opened the door, still wearing the crumpled pajamas from the night before. Standing there was Agnes. My grandmother, 78 years old, with a thin sweater draped over her shoulders, her silver hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and holding a small paper bag. She didn't say much, just looked at me quietly for a moment before placing the bag in my hands. Don't ask right now, just look inside. I closed the door and sat down beside the coffee table, hands trembling as I opened the bag. Inside was an old photocopy, the edges yellowed with age, but the text still sharp and clear. It was a home purchase contract, with my signature next to my mother's, clearly marked co-owner. Maya Carter. The date was over 10 years ago, when my mother had just been approved for financial assistance, with the condition of having a co-signer with a stable income. I remember I was only 22, fresh out of college and working just a few months, but I agreed to co-sign so Mom could buy the house she dreamed of. I didn't ask for anything in return. I simply thought, that's Mom. I trusted her. But all those years afterward, she never brought it up again. The house gradually became a place where I was only allowed to exist, never to speak. But Grandma remembered. She had kept that paper for 10 years. I held the contract copy, my hands gripping so tightly the paper wrinkled. Everything they took from me, every word they used to force me into silence, was based on a lie. I never removed my name from that contract. I was still a legal co-owner. They secretly transferred the ownership to Amber, forging new papers without ever consulting me. And that meant, if I took action, I still had a voice. I stood up and walked down the hall to my mother's bedroom. The door was closed. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times. Silence. I knocked again. From inside came my mother's tired, annoyed voice. "What is it?" I kept calm. "Mom, I need to talk. About the house. About the papers." The door opened. Not my mother, but my stepfather. He stood tall, arms crossed, his eyes cold, as if I were an unwelcome guest. "I'm busy," he said shortly. "I have proof that I'm still the legal co-owner of this house. I have the original contract." I held up the paper. My mother stood behind him but didn't come out. She just glanced at the paper, then turned away. My stepfather looked at me, then chuckled softly. "You really think that old piece of paper means anything? Aren't you ashamed? After all these years mooching off this house, now you want your rights back." My throat tightened, but I didn't bow my head. "I've paid most of the mortgage for the last 3 years. I've had enough. This isn't mooching, it's exploitation." He stepped closer, voice lowering. "You're nothing but a parasite in this house. No husband, no kids, no future. You should consider yourself lucky to stay here. Now get out before I have someone show you the door." I stood there, contract still in hand, each word cutting like tearing flesh. But I didn't back down. I took a step back, not out of fear but to steady my hands. Then I turned and walked away, past the hallway, through the living room, where my bedding had just been kicked off the couch, and back to the sofa. I sat down, clutching that paper like it was the only thing reminding me I wasn't crazy, not invisible. And no matter how many times they denied it, the truth was here, clear, concrete, undeniable. I was no longer part of their family, but I was still named on this house, and that was the beginning. There was no room left for silence. I went to the lawyer's office on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. On the way, my hands still held tight to the contract copy my grandmother gave me. Inside, I felt something undefinable, not exactly anger, not simply pain, just a quiet but firm resolve, like one door closing and another opening. The person I met was attorney Olivia Burns. She was about 40, petite but sharp-eyed. After hearing my story, she didn't interrupt once. She took careful notes and occasionally nodded. When I placed the old contract on the table, Olivia flipped through it, her eyes pausing at the phrase, co-ownership. "Maya," she said slowly, "your case isn't just a simple family dispute. What you describe shows serious financial abuse, and if what you've provided is accurate, this could qualify as criminal fraud." I nodded quietly, my throat dry. "First," she continued, "I will request a full transaction history from all related accounts. We need to closely examine all withdrawals and transfers, especially those going into accounts under other people's names." I handed her all the documents I'd printed from the bank: electric, water, service bills, and a series of emails confirming automatic payments I never authorized. Olivia looked through them, then turned to me with a serious expression. "Did you know?" she said. Some of these bills not only use your account, but also have your signature scanned without any authorization. I froze. Signature? Here, she pointed to a payment statement, sent from your email address, but the IP address is from a different location, and the signature doesn't exactly match the sample you've used before. A chill ran down my spine. So, that means it means someone forged your signature to conduct financial transactions, including payments and transfers. If we verify this through bank records, it's enough to pursue criminal charges. I sat silent, gripping the edge of my coat. In my head echoed my stepfather's voice from days before. You're a parasite. And now, the one called a freeloader was the only person paying for everything. Olivia went on. We'll file an emergency motion with the county court to freeze assets. Meanwhile, I advise you not to tell your family anything. If they find out about the investigation, they might try to withdraw all the money or destroy evidence. I breathed deeply. I won't say a word. She handed me a brief plan. First, request an emergency freeze on the house based on unresolved ownership disputes and the risk of asset loss. Second, request bank records and electronic invoices from third parties. Third, prepare to file a civil lawsuit with the possibility of criminal charges if forgery is confirmed. You can win back the house, Olivia said, or at least have the right to demand full compensation for the funds illegally withdrawn from your accounts. Also, if there's evidence of document and signature forgery, the court can impose heavier penalties. I said nothing more, just stared down at the table. The house I once cared for, painted walls, cozy kitchen corners, Christmas lights hanging every year, had now become the center of an unexpected battle. When I left the office, the rain still drizzled lightly. But inside, I no longer felt the chill. Maybe because I was no longer silent, no longer compliant. I was taking action. Not to preserve peace, but to reclaim what was mine and protect my own name. I left early one Monday morning as the sun rose just over the trees by the lake and the whole house lay still and quiet. No footsteps, no goodbye. I folded the blankets as usual, tied my old worn suitcase, gently closed the door behind me, carrying with me the original contract, a power of attorney for my lawyer, and a new key. The studio apartment I rented was located on the south side of Lake Monroe. Small, with low ceilings and white painted walls, the only window faced the cool blue water. No shouting, no babies crying in the middle of the night, no prying eyes whenever I opened the fridge, just me and my own breath. I slept a solid 8 hours without dreaming that first night. When morning came, I brewed coffee, opened the window, and listened to the wind rustling over the roof tiles. I never thought such simple things could quiet my heart so deeply. No one called me a burden. No one demanded extra money for electricity. A week later, Olivia texted me 3 words. They accepted it. I didn't ask for more. I just pictured the scene in my mind. That morning, while Amber was still in her pajamas, nursing the baby on the porch, 2 law enforcement officers and my legal representative showed up at the house. They knocked, probably polite, but firm, holding the asset freeze order signed by the county judge, stamped with a bright red seal in the lower right corner. My stepfather opened the door. He had no idea what was going on. Olivia later told me in a quick meeting that he frowned and loudly demanded to know who was behind this. The legal officer simply held out a copy of the contract in front of him. The original co-owner is Maya Carter. This is an official court order. You and anyone not listed as a lawful owner must cease all activity involving this property until the dispute is resolved. Amber stepped out of the bedroom, her hair still messy and face unmade. Maya? She's gone. Olivia answered calmly and clearly for me. She's not gone. She has legally authorized us to protect her infringed ownership rights, and currently she has full evidence proving she's been the primary payer for the expenses over the past 3 years. I heard the story without needing much imagination. I'd seen enough to know how they'd react. Amber screamed, called her mother. My stepfather grabbed his phone, demanding to speak with the judge. But the law doesn't bend for emotions. The freeze order prevented them from transferring, renting, or modifying any part of the house. The bank account used to receive the funds withdrawn from me was temporarily locked for investigation. Police carried a warrant to inspect suspicious signed bills. Every step was lawful, every move was documented. Olivia told me, when people get used to living off someone without question, they think they'll never have to pay the price. I said nothing. I just quietly stared at my phone screen where my mother's last unread message still blinked. I felt no joy, no pain, just a still emptiness like a windless lake. No voice in my head telling me to endure, no one calling me the invisible member. They thought I'd stay silent forever. They were wrong, and no yelling was needed, no arguing, just law. And my name on the house I once protected brick by brick. The call came on a Saturday afternoon while I was standing in the kitchen pouring coffee. The screen flashed a name I'd avoided looking at for weeks. Mom. I let it ring 3 times, then picked up, holding the phone lightly to my ear without saying a word. On the other end came heavy breaths. Then her voice cracked as if she'd been crying all night. Maya. I didn't expect things to get this far. I didn't think you'd push so hard. Her voice trembled with none of the toughness from before. I'm sorry. I was wrong. We're family, dear. Families should always try to find peace. I closed my eyes, my hands still wrapped around the steaming cup of coffee. Silence stretched for a few seconds. I waited for some feeling to rise, pain, anger, pity, but all I found was a faint emptiness. I spoke, calm beyond reason. Do you remember that day when a stranger looked at me and asked, "Are you the nanny?" And you nodded? Silence, no reply, no breath. I didn't wait. I hung up. My phone buzzed several times afterward. Mom, Amber, even my stepfather. Names appearing one by one, then disappearing. I didn't answer any calls, didn't text back. I sat by the window, watching the lake ripple gently with the wind, a place where no one knew me and no one used family ties to crush me with silent guilt. 3 days later, following the court order, Amber was forced to leave the house. The repossession took effect as soon as the legal ruling confirmed I was the original co-owner and main contributor for all this time. Their unclear financial dealings, combined with proof of forged signatures, had stripped their defense of any weight. My neighbor next door, Mrs. Lillian, my former high school biology teacher, sent me a brief message. She cried, Maya, but just like when she broke someone's window in 10th grade and blamed the kid, everything eventually comes to light. I read the message, feeling lighter. I wasn't happy to hear about my sister's tears, but I felt comforted knowing I was no longer drowning in denial. A week later, I signed papers to sell the old house. It wasn't worth a fortune, but enough for a down payment on the studio apartment I'd been renting under my name alone. No sharing, no co-ownership, no strings attached. When the agent handed me the deed to sign, I put my signature clearly and firmly. I signed without anyone standing behind me, demanding or silently erasing my name from a previous signature. The apartment wasn't large, but it had a small balcony big enough for 2 lavender pots. By the window stood the wooden desk I'd bought and assembled myself, screw by screw. Every morning I brewed my own coffee, opened the window to the breeze, and didn't need anyone's permission to breathe in peace. I no longer lived to please anyone, and more importantly, I no longer wondered if I deserved to live like this. Everything I have, I fought to reclaim. No noise, no complaints, just the truth and the rightful signature bearing my name. 6 months passed, summer in Bloomington softened, the sun no longer harsh but gentle like the last breath of the day. The corner street where my apartment sat had changed. The wall, once chipped and weathered, was freshly painted a rustic cream, large glass windows opening onto a tree-lined street. Inside, a small cafe called Stitch and Steam. The name came to me one evening as I folded the old quilt my grandmother had given me. I'd kept it since leaving the old house. a patchwork hand-stitched with small blue and silver gray squares, meticulously sewn like the fractures of my own soul, healed over time and awareness. I don't hang diplomas on the wall, nor do I display grand photos. I just framed that quilt and hung it high, right above the wooden bookshelf by the door. Everyone who enters sees it. My grandmother moved in with me at the start of fall. She brought a small suitcase, a few classic novels, a white porcelain tea set, and a jar of peppermint candies. When I asked, "Why didn't you stay in the old house?" she simply replied, "Because here, when I look at you, I see you as yourself." I needed no more than that. Every morning, she's the first to rise, brewing the first pot of tea and arranging the local newspapers. I open the cafe doors, prepare coffee, sweep the patio, and stack wooden chairs. Regular customers come by, a retired piano teacher, students seeking quiet study space, early risers grabbing coffee to go. Everyone smiles and calls me by my real name, with no roles attached, no forced titles. One afternoon, while wiping down the counter, she came over holding an old envelope. "I was the co-signer when your mother borrowed money to buy that house," she said calmly. "Without my signature, they wouldn't have gotten approved. I did it because your mother didn't qualify on her own." I was silent, took the envelope. Inside was a confirmation of the financial guarantee from years ago, with a faded signature. Below it, a handwritten note. "For Maya, don't let anyone take away what you helped create." I sat in the wooden chair by the table, still holding the paper, eyes stinging. "I always knew," she said. "I was just waiting for you to see it with your own eyes." I placed the paper on the table, looked up at her. "Are you sad that it came to this?" She smiled softly. "No, because you finally stood up for yourself." In the days that followed, I no longer lay awake at night, nor did I scan the room wondering if someone was watching me, or silently moving my things without warning. I had my own key, my own schedule, and a space where every corner was chosen by me. One time, a customer asked, "What does your cafe's name mean?" I smiled. "It's about things that were once broken, but sewn back together, by hand and by heart. And steam, the thing that helps every coffee bean bloom." The customer smiled. Beautiful, like life that's been brewed. I said nothing more, just looked out the window where the late day light shimmered on the lake. In that frame, I saw myself, not a shadow of anyone, not someone living on pity. I used to think I needed recognition to exist, but now I understand. Peace doesn't come from anyone else's permission. Peace comes when we choose ourselves every day, whether others do or not. And here, among the smell of coffee and the clink of teapots, I have chosen myself. No asking, no bowing, no need for anyone's approval. What would you do if one day the people you loved most turned their backs, took everything from you, and called it loyalty? If it were you, would you stay silent like I did, or stand up like I did? I don't wish anyone to endure what I went through, but if you ever feel like a shadow in your own home, remember, you are not alone. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story, because sometimes just being understood is a step toward healing. If this story moved you, if anything in it touched your memories, please like and subscribe, because there are many more stories to come about family, about wounds too hard to speak aloud, and about those small moments that remind us we deserve so much more.